Hi, I'm Carl Jacobs, a councillor in the City of Johannesburg, and today I'm joined by the DA Caucus Chief Whip in the City of Johannesburg and former MMC of Economic Development, Councillor Leah Knott. Leah, thank you for joining us today.
Thanks for having me.
So, Leah, the Metro Centre closed in September last year and has now become almost a ghost building with no one there. Please, can you tell us what is going on and why they closed the Metro Centre?
So basically, the Johannesburg Property Company, or JPC as we call it, came up with this idea of decanting Metro Centre, which basically means they're removing everybody else. They're putting them into private sector buildings, which the city then has to pay for, aka the residents. And they've done this on the basis that the building is structurally unsafe and could fall down on everybody's heads at any minute. It's also not the first time they've made this proposal. This proposal has come as far back as Parks Tau and Jeff Makuba and Herman Mashaba and Impo, our DA mayor from the current term. And it's, in essence, a R1 billion exercise. And that's what the residents of the city have to fork out in order to decant this particular building.
Sure. So, Leah, tell us, if it's so operationally inefficient to do this, and also comes at such a massive cost to the residents, why would the city want to do this?
Well, I think it's really all about the money, isn't it? Because this can be done through an entity which the city doesn't wholly have proper management over, understanding that Joburg has 13 entities. And if we look at the news that's been going through, recently, the difference between Cape Town and Joburg, and Cape Town being DA run, is that Cape Town administration has control over all its departments. In Joburg, the previous ANC government basically split up all the entities, and JPC was one of these. They operate under their own guise with very little oversight. And basically nobody is able to pinpoint what they're doing with these deals. They bring reports to council, like they did with this particular one, where we don't actually know the entirety of the financial burden that's being placed on the city. It's R2 billion plus. We don't know what is actually happening with the leases because the public participation wasn't done properly. And it wasn't put before council. So your councillors did not actually see what was said by the general public in terms of decanting this building and going out on private leasing.
Sure. So, Leah, this is not the first time that we've heard about alleged corruption at the JPC. Please, can you share some insight and background to what exactly is going on at the JPC?
Well, where do I start? I've been in the City of Johannesburg since 2016, and I suspect there are a lot more instances that we aren't aware of. But just from being in the city for that amount of time, we actually reported Helen Boertjes and senior management within JPC to the SIU, which is the Special Investigative Unit within the Presidency's office that was established during COVID. And we did this because we picked up on PPE irregularities in terms of spending. JPC themselves were, for example, fogging basements, 7 different companies all on the same day, costing millions of rands. And the SIU actually came back and found them guilty of financial misconduct. And the city manager at the time was instructed to act on the SIU investigations, which didn't happen under the ANC government in the last term. When we came, into the current term, we did implement, disciplinary proceedings against the management within JPC. Some of the people had resigned, but the top management remained. And in essence, Helen Boertjes, for example, was suspended pending the investigation and, the implementation of those findings alongside several other allegations. And then the government changed in February 2023, and all of these people were reinstated. These investigations, again, are left to gather dust on the shelves. Now, we're talking millions of rands. During a time that people were financially destitute, lost their jobs, couldn't get food. And we are sweeping this under the rug like it didn't happen. We also go back to outdoor advertising, which is handled commercially by JPC. We haven't had a proper outdoor advertising contract since 2017. And we cannot collect that money because in terms of the Municipal Finance Management Act, you have to have a contract in order to collect the money. So that it's free fall, but money is being paid somewhere. When we tried to implement these things and basically cancel contracts, we were hit, with a brick wall by JPC. What's interesting to note is that some of the, I'll say, characters involved in the PPE investigations were appointed in outdoor advertising contracts over the last current year. And we heard this from a whistleblower. So in essence, what it sounds like is that they were trying to buy off people that were investigating the PPE fraud in order to ensure that these investigations stay on the, gathering dust on the shelves.
So, Leah, can you tell us then who are some of the people that stand to benefit from this decanting operation?
Well, look, I think you'd have to go back a little bit, and look at the motion of no confidence against the DA-led administration back in early sort of or end of 2022, early 2023, where the Proton House issue came up, and we actually lodged a case with SAPS for that. And 29 million rand was paid to a service provider who we'd had a lease with more than a year prior. And essentially, the allegations that were lodged with SAPS were that the money, this 29 million rand, was actually paid to certain political parties or councillors from political parties in order to vote against the administration of that time. In essence, JPC is known. It's known really for siphoning money out of property deals without properly getting the opinions or the decisions of council, without providing full information. And we're sitting in an election year. I don't need to tell people where this money's going.
Yeah. So we clearly have a massive problem on our hands here. And I do understand this is a local issue. But in the context of this national and provincial elections that we have, what would we be able to do if the DA were to win the Gauteng province to deal with matters like this?
Well, you look at how well the Western Cape and Cape Town work, and they tie in a lot of, their services and their to the people, really. And the same can happen in Gauteng. Legislation allows for the provincial government to basically intervene in a lot of the stuff that goes in, on within a city. It doesn't mean that there's some sort of hierarchy, but it allows that support to happen. And if things go wrong in the city of Johannesburg, although the government probably won't change after the national and provincial election, it'll allow the provincial government to perform oversight and get them back on track. And if I can give you a optimal example of that, of what we've just done, because the current ANC-led, or is it ANC-led? It's PA, EFF, ANC-led with the old Jama-ah. I mean, who knows what's going on there? But in essence, they've passed an adjustment budget and a loan with no particular details in council this past month. And they did this without a special majority, which is required by the Constitution. So they only had 120 votes. They needed 136, but they passed it. And our caucus, as the DA, wrote to the provincial government and to national government and said, hang on a second. What's happened here is completely illegal. They've broken the Constitution, which is the highest law of our land. And the response back that we get from province is so lackluster that basically we know they're not going to do anything about it. And it's not the first time. We've written to the provincial Department of Cogta. We've had, responses back going, noted, we'll investigate, and you don't hear back from them 1, 2, 3 years later. And a lot of instances are dealing with JPC, with unlawful leases, failing to advertise, failing to get proper resolutions from council, and basically doing their own thing behind the scenes.
Sure. So from what I understand, you're saying is the mechanisms are there, and we can intervene in this looting. But we need people to go out there on the 29th of May and vote for the Democratic Alliance.
It's imperative. I think, the DA is currently neck and neck with the ANC. A single vote is so important. I can't even stress that enough. And, we've seen in many municipalities and many, places across South Africa that a single vote can turn an entire government. So every vote counts.